So before we get into the presentation, and I'm going to be tonight's presenter, so hopefully this is going to go pretty fast. I would like to say thank you to Capital Factory. They're one of the sponsors, and they give us this great space to meet up at. And then also other Inbox, who gave us the pizza and gave us the refreshments. Very good. So how many people here, with a show of hands, how many people are coming to this meetup for the first time? Okay, very good. And how many people have read Running Lean or have read Lean Startup by Eric Ries? Okay, good, most of the room. Actually, one more thing. You want to give an announcement or you want to do it? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. Anyways, so in case I forget, there is a sister meetup group to this. It's Lean UX. Travis is the organizer of that. They're meeting up next Tuesday. Presentations are always great. So if anyone's interested, basically look up Lean UX, ATX.
Lean User Experience.
Lean User Experience Austin. But tonight, I want to get into talking about experiments, right? And for those of you guys who sort of read like the little introduction to it, I want everyone to, ideally by the end of this presentation, to really have a new mental model of what it is that every entrepreneur needs to go out and do, and really a new way also to go about, maybe not necessarily a new way, but a more systematic way that we go out and we start building our products. And so really this is going to be the new mental model that I want everyone to take in, right? Is that the job of every entrepreneur in this room is to go out and to actually manufacture happy customers. We're going to take raw visitors, people who have never heard of us before, and through a series of interactions with ads, with blogs, with our website, with our product, we're going to transform them into people who are raving fans, paying us money, and ideally brand advocates. And so when we look at this, I like to put that in context with this hockey stick curve, right? And this is the holy grail of what every entrepreneur wants to reach, right? Which is where we started to turn our business into something where it is a repeatable process and we're starting to scale it. And if we look across this, if we were able to zoom in, what we would be able to see is really what we have is a lot of actions or a lot of experiments that the startup has gone out and done to start systemizing, to start figuring out ways to take that raw input of strangers and to produce them into something else and to transform them into people who are getting a lot of value from our product. And so as a quick list of examples, we could say that maybe someone starts off and their product is targeting yoga teachers, right? And then through doing some problem interviews and maybe even some solution interviews, they find out that yoga trainers aren't the right customer segment for it. Maybe it's actually personal trainers. And then from there, what they start doing is they're starting to get people who are interested in their product. And then they put out an onboarding guide, right? And because of that onboarding guide, people are now starting to get a good positive experience with the product. And then through that, they nail retention. People love the product. People are coming in every single day, every single week. And once you're in the system, you stay there. And then maybe at the end of it, they do a referral system, right? Where we do something, maybe they figured out like a double-sided incentive, similar to what Dropbox does, where if you get someone to sign up, we'll give you $25 and they get $25 as well, right? And so what I'm going to be talking about tonight are really these two key points. One is modeling your business. And we're going to be talking about laying down a baseline for how you think about your business and how you start building out that systematic approach to it. And then the second thing is going to be about triaging experiments. And triaging experiments is going to be about, well, given a finite amount of resources, given a limited runway in which to get to success, how do we actually prioritize through all of the experiments that we have that we need to do? And then at the end of that, I'm going to share case studies. I'm going to talk about experiments that we ran at Spark 59 last year. and some of the challenges that we faced when trying to go out and move the numbers within our system, and some of the lessons that we learned. And as I'm doing this presentation tonight, if this is your first one here, we like these to be conversational. So if you have a question, if you have feedback, if you have a different idea on how to do something, raise your hand, shout it out. But by no means should this be a one-way conversation. So this is the big goal, right? We want to take strangers and we want to turn them into these happy customers. And so really the analogy here is of a customer factory, right? And these are the different states that we're going to go and start to transform our customer. And so before someone can pay us any money, they have to become aware of us, right? And then normally they actually have to sign up for our product. And so that's what acquisition is really how does someone go from hearing about us to then actually starting to experience our product. And then activation is when that person has signed up for your tool, when they're starting to experience it. What is that point where they've had that first gratifying experience? And then after that, depending on your model, you might have retention, right? Where you have a trial period of 15 days and you want that person to really come back multiple times. And then at the end of that, we have revenue. And so a good example of this, of being activation, is I gave my mom an iPad for Christmas. And about 45 minutes ago, I got the third FaceTime chat with my mom that I had today, right? And so I had spent probably 3-4 years trying to get my mom to use an iPad, and she hated the idea, right? And 2 weeks ago, she gave me a call and she yelled at me, complaining about, and my wife is smiling about this, but my mom called me and she was like, I didn't ask for this gift. I don't know how to use this. The internet's not working. But then now I have my mom literally I feel like I've created a monster because she's just calling me up to let me know that she got her groceries. And so this is the point of activation, right? I had a very hard time on these first two steps, right? But now that my mom knows that she can call me and see me, and she can show me her cute little cat, declawed, scratching on the couch, or call my brother up in New York, she's hooked, right? She's using this almost too much on a daily basis. And so what I showed earlier is just a very simple funnel, right? But this can get a lot more complex. We can really start taking this a lot deeper. I have referral here outside of the system because for a lot of products, referral isn't a linear process, right? You can immediately sign up, invite a friend, or you can try it out for a little bit. So, how this is arranged is really going to be unique to the different business models, and I will share some examples of those. And then another thing that's a lot of times really important is retention beyond revenue. Especially when you're a SaaS product or when you're in e-commerce, one of the most valuable metrics is actually looking at customer retention, right? What is that churn rate that you have? Or if you're in e-commerce, how long does it take for that person to come back and to do that second purchase, third purchase, fourth purchase, etc. And so I just wanted to show some of the other models here. Usually, again, when we have SaaS businesses, the looking at the lifetime value is really what's key, right? It's how long, not only is it, can we convert people to paying customers, but how long can we keep them? And then that usually has a big influence on how much you can pay to get new customers, right? If you can keep a customer and make $600 off them, but it only costs you $45 to acquire them, then that gives you basically the runway to go out and to really fuel that customer acquisition. We can look at different models where we have things like paid apps. And a good example of this is like Adobe Photoshop for the iPad, where it costs $8, right? I don't actually get to try the product first. I have to give Adobe $8 for me actually, for them to even acquire me as a customer. And then from there, they worry about getting me to have a successful experience. And then this can be additional, but you have a lot of products then where I can buy more brushes, I can buy more filters, right? You can continue this funnel in this factory process further on down. And then there are also the products where we don't even have a revenue model per se. You can look at things like WhatsApp and Snapchat, where really the tool itself is only valuable if you've referred someone to it. And there are other examples. You can look at HipChat where there would be a retention, or I'm sorry, where there would be a revenue event. But it's just to show that there are other models out there. But for the context of tonight, we're going to work with this simple model, right? And this fits almost for any single business. And what we can do here is once we've sort of identified what this flow is, we can begin to build a baseline, whether it's your existing product right now, or if it's a projection, right? If you actually want to model out your business on paper. And so we can look at that we're getting about 5,000 people per month who are coming and visiting our page, right? And in this example, this is leanstack.com. This is one of the products that we have at Spark 59. And of those people, we're getting about 40% of them who convert, and that's giving us 2,000 people who on a monthly basis are using our tool. And then from there, we're able to get 70% of people to that happy point. And for us, that happy point is when someone has filled out 9 out of the 12 boxes on the tool. Because Lean Canvas is a tool to help you model a business idea. It's a way to write a business plan without having actually to do all of the extra work. It's not a substitute for a business plan, but it's a way basically to build a back of the envelope, back of the napkin sketch of your business. And then from there, let's say 4% of the people actually upgrade to the premium features. And again here, even if you do not have a current product, even if you don't have a way, if you're thinking of baseline needs, it's a very valuable exercise, right? Because if you've calculated that, I'm going to have a product that targets $50 a month, and I need $10,000 in recurring revenue monthly to be able to support myself, so that I don't have to work full time somewhere else, that I can actually work here. Well, then you can begin to work backwards, right? We can do what we would call bottom-up modeling, and you can reverse and see sort of the different steps that you might need for your product. And once we have this model, the things that we can start doing is we can look at hypothetically if we ran an experiment, right? So here what we would be doing is we're going to do a split test of our landing page. We have a control, and that's how we're operating right now, and we want to do a new landing page. And we think that if we put out this landing page, we're going to be able to get conversion rate at 55%. And so assuming that all the other things stay equal, then that means that we're going to be able to add 21 new customers to our funnel on a monthly basis. Now, important thing here also, if we really are tracking a real experiment, is that when we're running experiments, what matters most is the throughput at the end of the funnel, right? And a lot of times, and this is things that we've done firsthand, is where we have been able to actually optimize, we've been able to increase acquisition, right? We started sending out emails as soon as they signed up. We sent a daily reminder, and we were able to get that acquisition number higher. But because we sent out so many emails, it pissed off a lot of people. And so at the end of the funnel, we didn't see as many people upgrading, right? And so one of the dangers is that you can try to produce larger numbers, but really at the end of the day, right, if we're looking at this as a factory system, all we care about is the throughput at the end of the funnel. Any questions so far? Okay, awesome. And just a fun thing to think about, sort of like a shortcut. If you ever want to double your revenue, you can basically do it through one of 2 ways. One is that you can double the amount of people that you're actually just putting into the funnel, right? The second way is that we can increase conversion among any step of the whole process, right? It doesn't matter where it is. If you double that conversion point, you're going to get double the amount of people at the end of it. And then the final thing is that you can double the price. And this is something that most people discount. It's a thing that most people don't think. And doubling your price, especially when you're established, is not necessarily something that's easy to do. But if you do double your price and you don't lose more than half of your customers, you're making more money on a monthly basis, right? So what that can be is that you can try raising your price by 25%, and seeing if that actually affects your conversion. If you don't lose more than 25% of the people, then you've made more money literally by moving a number, right? And that's an experiment that I would recommend to someone in this room. And I had forgotten to tell them earlier, so. So now let's start getting into like the triaging of the experiments. And if we have time, maybe we'll discuss that experiment in more detail.
I don't know why you keep pointing over here.
Right, because I know you guys. So when I'm talking about the concept of triaging, that's really how do we go about and how do we assign priority? How do we actually how do we decide which experiments should we go out and we should start running, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we're normally problem solvers. We usually don't have an issue of coming up with ideas. What we do have an issue with is executing on those ideas. And so really there are three filters that I like to go through when looking at experiments. And the concept thing here really is that we're sorting our experiments both on the necessity of what we need to go out and do to make our business sustainable, but then we're also looking at them for the potential, right? For the potential impact that they can deliver for us. And so if we go back, so what I'll do is I'll walk through some examples, right? So here we have a funnel or a system that's basically, the context to it is it's a SaaS product, right? It's a freemium model, and so we can see that they're getting 50,000 people a month who are coming in, and then they're getting 20,000 people to sign up, right? So that's a pretty good number. And from there, of those 20,000 people that sign up, 14,000 of them are having that positive experience. And at the end of the funnel, we're getting 420 new customers. And so some people might think that, well, that's only 420 people, right? But again, here we're not talking about pricing. We're not talking about operating costs. There are a lot of companies where this is a multi-million-dollar business, right? So we're not diving into those details. But if I were to ask you guys, where do you think the opportunity is here that you would begin to invest in? What would you guys say? Someone throw it out. Where?
Revenue.
Right, and why revenue?
Make a money.
Right, yeah, I think here revenue really is the place that you want to get, because when you start seeing numbers that are in the thousands, one of the things is that you validated that you can get customers, right? At 50,000, you're getting roughly 1,700 people per day, so you're driving good traffic. You're obviously doing a good job on the acquisition side of things. And when you have that large of an audience, right, let's say you're just a SaaS product, right? There are multiple ways, once you start having an audience of that size, there's more than just selling your direct product to make money, right? You can try doing upsells, you can do partnerships with other people. So there's a lot of room there. There's a lot of room there to go out and to make more revenue. The other reason why that area is interesting is because, again, at the end of the day, we're here to make money, right? And that is the area that probably has the most potential to help you make enough of an impact to go out and to scale to something else. And this is, again, like a hypothetical situation. And I will say also, just from my personal experience, that as numbers start getting higher, it gets harder, actually, to move the needle, right? To try to go from, I don't think anyone would be able to double that acquisition rate. Going from 40% to 80% is not something that you would be able to do across your whole customer segment. At best, what you could do is try to filter that. You could begin to target different customer segments, right? But we start seeing a thing of diminishing returns as we begin to get higher numbers. So here's another scenario, and I'll give a little bit more explanation. So this is when a company is in product market fit. And for those of you who need a refresher on product market fit is essentially where you have an MVP, right? You've built out some product, and you're starting to sell it to customers. And really what you're trying to do then is you're testing to see, is the product delivering value? And am I actually starting to target the right people? And are they signing up for it? And so here, we have someone who's got a lot less traffic. They have 600 people coming in on a monthly basis. And at the end of that, we're getting them to produce 65%, right? What we see when we look at numbers like this, it means that Not a lot of people are converting to signups, but the people who do are loving the product, right? They're getting engaged with it, and then a lot of those people are staying on and they're paying money to use it, right? So what do you think would be the opportunity here? Where would you guys, what would you prioritize for experiments? Right, yeah, and I think this one is pretty straightforward. But here what we look at is that really the product is right, the product is working, and so what we need to do is we need to find more scalable channels, whether that's starting to invest in doing AdWords, right? Like maybe, because one of the things is with inbound channels, so when you're doing infographics, white papers, all those things take time to develop. They're very hard to ramp up in a very short amount of time. But advertising, as long as you have the budget, or as long as you have the cash and your customers are feeling that, that's a great way to go out and to start getting more people. For you guys in the back, there are a couple open chairs, so if anyone wants to sit down, feel free to come up here to the front. And then this one's a little bit trickier. So what about when you're sort of grown, you haven't had like that great of a vision, and so you're getting about 2,000 people a month, which is a decent amount of traffic. It's enough definitely that you can learn from. You're getting about 600 people to sign up, so that percentage is looking okay. You're getting 30% of those people to actually have a good experience with the product, and of those people who do, 40% of them are paying you money, right? Or are paying you, I should say, not necessarily money also, right? Because sometimes we don't actually need just monetary transactions. Sometimes how people pay us is through eyeballs, right? We get their eyeballs and then we sell those to other people, or through their data. We collect data on them and then there's someone else who's interested in purchasing that data. But in this model, where do you guys think the area for experimenting is? Activation? Okay. And why would you guys say activation? Which is correct.
It just 30% seems really low compared to the other ones. I mean, I think 30% would have a positive reaction to the product. You would think either you're targeting the wrong people or the product's not really that great and you can improve it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When you see activation at a rate like 30%, it's a very low number because you obviously have people who are interested in what you've offered, right? These other 70% of the people who dropped out here don't count. But to these other 30% that you did make an offer to, that your landing page promised something to them, they were interested in your product, right? And so you would definitely want to dive in deeper and begin to see, well, what is that disconnect, right? Are people having a hard time? You open up you log into the tool and it's a blank screen, right? And people don't know what to do with the tool. Or is it that they had a different expectation? You're not really being clear enough on what you're offering to these people. A lot of times also where you see numbers like this is when someone has been going after, has had like a group of early adopters where they have background knowledge, where they actually already know how to use the tool. But when you start expanding, when you start going to a broader audience, they need more training, right? They need actually help figuring out how to use the tool. And so in this area, this is where I would look at experimenting. Any questions on this? Any reasons why we wouldn't target anything else? Anyone wondering about that? Okay. So that was looking at opportunity and looking at priority. The next thing is looking at the resource cost. And so before diving into some examples, I kind of want to just share some general thoughts on the different ones. And also, all of this stuff, the slide deck, I'll be sharing it post. So, for you guys taking notes, definitely take notes, but all of this will be available as well. So when we're talking about things that we build in awareness and experiments that we run, this is really that vehicle that you use to get awareness to your customers, right? So it's the medium. It can be an infographic, it can be social media, it can be webinars, it can be doing meetup groups regularly. But really what we're looking at is what channels are driving people to our landing page or to whatever it is that we will be making an offer to them. And so because these things really aren't, because they're more of like the medium, these are things that I feel that you can do, you can usually do in a few days worth of work, right, in general. Someone who's new to AdWords can go on and within a day you can start running an AdWord campaign and you can be spending $100 and driving 100 people to your site pretty easily. When we start getting into acquisition, this is something that is going to take, at a minimum, depending on what you're doing, it could be as simple as you've heard that you have red buttons and now you want to put green buttons because it looks like your early adopters are going to be leprechauns and you have a feeling that green buttons are going to be very successful with leprechauns, right? But really what we're talking about, the things that we change when we're doing these acquisition is about messaging. It's about clarity of that offer that you are putting in front of that person, and then creating desire, right? You want to get their attention, you want to make it interesting, and then you want to have your offer be so good that they put in whatever work is needed, whether it's signing up, whether it's downloading something. And so when we're doing those things, it's headlines, it's content, it's new layout. It can be a demo video. But usually these are things that, scope of 1 week or 2 weeks, unless you're going out and you're doing something radically new, right? And then, that might be really coming up with a whole new positioning statement and things of those sorts. Oops, sorry. And when we start getting into activation is not the features that you have, but it's the way that you get people over that hump of suckiness, over that hump of this is my first time using your tool, so how do I start getting something positive out of it? And so these are things that are really about sequencing. How do you present information? Do you have someone just do a portion of your product, and then you give them the next thing and you unlock features within the tool? And so it's really about the flow and about the UX, the different elements that you're presenting to them. And then revenue is where like the gloves come off, where this can be sometimes something that you can do in a day, 2 days, or sometimes it's a product where you hear, the team has been working on this for 6 months, right? Or the team has been working on this for 9 months. And it might even be the first time you're building your product, right? If you don't have a product yet, then this is where you're really investing in that feature set that's going to be converting people and really the whole basis for your product. And the other thing that can happen here also, again, is so I put pricing in there, right? Because again, that is one of the very simple ways is you can try doing tiered plans. You can try changing from a 30-day trial to a 40-day trial. And even something else that I put on there is like paywalls, right? We've had good success with moving our paywalls around, getting people deeper into the product, making the product more alluring by not being able to see features, right? So these are all the sort of things that you can test when you're looking at revenue. So here, let's go back and let's take that example of the SaaS freemium, right? And let's say that we do want to prioritize that 3% conversion rating. We want to get more people to revenue. So one of the ideas that we have is that we're going to release X new feature. And this is going to have a substantial impact. It's going to increase the number of paying customers we have to 9%. And so we're going to get 840 new customers, which is basically, we're going to triple our size of the number of customers that we're getting. But the thing is, this is a big build. It's going to be about 2 months' work for a small team, right? And so that's why we're saying 350 to 400 hours. We might also have a different idea, which could be that we haven't played with our checkout system in a long time, and we want to do. We feel there's an opportunity there, to put some more messaging in. Maybe we hear Bitcoin. We want to be up with the latest, and we're going to start taking Bitcoin and PayPal and every other way that people try to pay for things. And so this, because of security and other things, it's still a pretty intensive project, right? It's going to take about a month's worth of work, and we're still going to have, or about 2 weeks worth of work, but we think we're going to get about 105 customers. And then, yeah.
How are you getting those percentage points? Is this something you're just doing that you're hoping you have, or is it going back to something else that allowed you to come up with those numbers?
That's a great question. So for those of you who didn't hear, she's asking how did I get those percentage points? So from here, I made them up because it's a very hypothetical situation. But that is honestly a challenge, right? I think what's interesting is when we write experiments, we always want to declare up front what we think the impact is going to be, right? That's part of the analysis process of creating a good experiment. But you face that situation of how do you really know, right? How do you actually know that it's going to make this effort or it's going to have that impact? And so I will touch upon that more here in a second. But what I would say, a really good exercise, and this also works when you're thinking of pricing, is that you want to outline more than one option. And so you want to do a range. So here, if I needed more, I would say, okay, well, it's going to go from 0.1% to 0.75, right? And so you basically do a low, a medium, and a high. And this is an exercise that works great, really, because what you're doing is, as the entrepreneurs, a lot of times we put a spotlight on one specific number, right? But if that's wrong, that usually has a ripple effect. So here, what you do is you're basically just widening the scope, and you're looking through more options and basically analyzing them. So, and if I worked in this company, like if I was the founder of this hypothetical company, as you start running more experiments, you start getting a better sense of, like, the past results of other experiments heavily influence what you think the next actions are going to be and what the results will be, right? If you've tried a certain type of landing page and it didn't work, and let's say you just changed the design, right? You kept the same content, but you made it flashier, you put some animations, and that didn't do much. Well, you know there from a previous experiment that the layout wasn't a big factor. The layout wasn't, like, the actual aesthetic of it wasn't a big component of what was driving acquisition. Maybe it was the video headline that you have, or the celebrity endorsement. So, does that help? And so on this last experiment that we could have, this is really a day and a half's worth of work. And the experiment would be around setting up lifecycle emails. And lifecycle emails are one of those things that if you've never tried using them for the tool and you have an existing product and you have a way to communicate with the users, I would strongly recommend for most people in here to start exploring them. Because essentially what lifecycle emails do is, we're very familiar with, like, drip campaigns where you sign up for a tool and it basically, every 3 days it's sending you an email. But with lifecycle emails, what you're doing is you start getting more contextual to where the user is with your product. So let's say you signed up for Netflix and you have a 14-day trial and you haven't watched, you've watched one video, which was a comedy. And so based on that, Netflix might send you an email 2 days later and say, hey, you saw this comedy and you love this movie, so why don't you go out and watch another one, right? Or let's say you signed up for Basecamp and you set up a project, but you haven't invited any collaborators to it, right? So rather than it just sending out an email that's like, hey, you signed up for Basecamp, go test out these features, right? And one of these features is how to set up a project. Well, you've already done that work, right? And so lifecycle emails really start getting more specific to the actions that you need to do, or that you should, or maybe you've dropped out, right? And so they're just basically the right email at the right time. And so here, there are lots of people also, customer.io, they're a really good tool for doing lifecycle emails. And so here, you don't even have to go out and build the system, right? You can integrate with a tool like them, and it's not gonna have a huge impact, but we're going to see 35 new customers at the end of this. And so how would we go about, like, what would you guys look at to try to prioritize which experiments? Great.
The bigger the feature or the opportunity there is, I call it a holy grail experiment, is where you can get current clients to pay for the development work, sell it to them at a discount off the expected selling price. And if you can get them to fund the entire development, your risk just went down, way down as well, and you'll close a lot more future clients. We did this when I was in the software development business many times. And it's a no-lose situation. Those clients also become an advisory board.
Yeah, and so for those of you who didn't hear, so Greg basically talked about you get your clients to fund the development, right? If there really is like that customer pull for it, then you can go out to them and you can try to get them to pay you in advance for it or to pay you more. What other experiments look promising on here? What else would you guys think is worth it? Okay, so you guys would want to do, with a show of hands, who here would make their next experiment the big experiment? Okay, not a lot of action there. What about this checkout overhaul? All right, what about the lifecycle emails? Okay, so why? What was it about the lifecycle emails that stood out?
Real time.
Real time? Real time for the feedback to give you, or real time?
You just need to be able to give live subjects. Like that's what's going on right now.
Yeah?
Better, in terms of opportunity cost, it has a better return.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think here, the simple answer is that if we were to make an ROI and we were to look at the number of hours based upon the result that we get, the lifecycle email has the highest one. But the thing also with the lifecycle email though is if we really want to grow our business, then shouldn't we be tackling this? Like this is what is going to make us a lot more money. And so should we really focus on this little one? And the answer here is that we actually can't. We shouldn't make a decision yet. I didn't give you guys enough information because what we really need to look at is the uncertainty, right? We need to look at what is the actual risk of us developing these different experiments. And so here's where I'm going to get into what I feel is like some of the ninja tactics. Like what are the things that, for me, when I look back at what I've learned from Lean, what is one of like the fundamental things that has really helped me as an entrepreneur. And in Lean, we talk about avoiding waste, right? And this is the process. This is the thing that we want to do, is that before we go out and we make large investments, we want to make sure that we have evidence, right? And I use that word specifically because it's not enough, to have intuition, to have guts, or to trust your gut, right? Because one of the worst things that can happen to an entrepreneur is that you are a victim of your own success. And by that, I mean that you were very successful with the previous experiment or with the previous company, right? And so you get confident, and then you go out and you spend $1 million or $2 million going to a new market, right? And these are real numbers of people that we've worked with. And you spend 2 years trying to develop a new product, right? You nailed it the first time, got very lucky, worked really hard, and then on the second time, it hasn't worked out at all, right? And so what we need to look at is evidence, and we need to try to do, we want to start getting into small scale testing, right? Small batch sizes, and experiments that we can run very fast that we're going to use proxies. Because the worst thing that you can do is build something that nobody wants. Regardless if this is a feature or if you're a first-time entrepreneur and you've dropped $40,000, to get your app in the Apple Store, and now when you're expecting 100 people to sign up a day, you've had 5 people, and one of those is your mom and one of those is your neighbor, right? And those are true things that happen. So what we think about then is this concept that I like that I put together for this presentation. I don't know if this will be, but I think they're predictive experiments. And really what we try to do, when I'm talking about a proxy, it's a substitute, right? If you don't have your actual product yet, then we can use lots of other proxies. We can use videos, we can use fake landing pages, we can use snapshots as ways, we can even use personal interviews, right? As ways to describe the product, as a way to be a substitute for it, and still try to test with the customer as close to real life, and try to see what their intent is, and try to get some evidence. If we talk to 20 people and 2 out of the 20 people say that they would be interested, that doesn't kill our product, but it certainly raises a red flag, right? And so one of my favorite examples is when people use smokescreen pages. And simply what you're doing here is that you put a picture of a product and you say, buy this now, right? In this example, it's a scooter and it's going through Craigslist. And it's the idea someone had to test really a rent-to-own concept for Vespas. And the first time this person tried to sell scooters, and this is Trevor Owen from Lean Startup Machine, he wanted to sell electric scooters. And he bought some from China, had them shipped out to the Midwest, drove them around his campus, and because they were electric, he thought at the time, there was gasoline was expensive, there was the whole like eco movement, and so he thought that people really would want to go out and be on scooters. No one cared, no one bought it. He tried lots of different things, couldn't sell them. Built a custom landing page, wasted a lot of time with that. And then he started getting feedback. What I really want is, I want to drive a Vespa, right? I want to have a Vespa because it's like a pair of Ray-Bans. I want to project that image, right? It's part of my lifestyle. But rather than just acting on that feedback that he got, is he created a page and he basically made it look like you could buy it then. And he directed some traffic to it, and his phone started ringing, right? In a matter of hours, he had gotten lots of people who were signing or who were very interested in purchasing the product, right? So that's a smoke test. You fake it. You fake it. Another good example, one thing that we did with one of our products is that, so we have a website now which is Lean Stack. It's the business modeling stuff. But before it was Lean Stack, it was leancanvas.com, right? And we had this additional functionality that we wanted to build out into it. And so because we had an audience, because we had people who were already existing users, and our product also, we use offline. People actually print out these posters, they use them. If you're a team that's all local, you can do all this stuff with paper, with other things. We made a Keynote template and we made a set of posters. And rather than building out the code of all this functionality, we started selling a Keynote template for $29. And we were able to get people, basically we started getting about 1.5 people every single day were buying the template, right? As literally as something that I was able to make in 4 hours. And with that, we were able to both validate that people had an interest for using this feature. It's not the same feature as having it online, right? But we are showing that people are willing to pay us money. And then, what was the second thing we validated with this? That people would pay us. And then it also served as a way to fund the development of it, right? If we're looking at a cash flow perspective, we're doing what Greg was talking about, where people are actually paying us up front to build out this product. And then another classic example is Dropbox. And so for those of you who haven't heard the story before, Dropbox released, Larry Drew basically released this 3-minute video, and it was a teaser of Dropbox. It was explaining the concept, and within it, it's a really simple video of him narrating over a screen share of how Dropbox is going to work and how it's going to synchronize, how you can drop one file here and it's going to magically show up over here. And I like this example because it also illustrates like Dropbox is a difficult thing to explain with a picture, right? If I put a static picture here of, hey, there's a file here and another picture over here and now the file shows up there, you lose that, right? And so for him, the proxy, a picture wasn't good enough, right? But he was able to create a video. He was very intelligent also that he put in, he knew who his early adopters were, and so he put a lot of like Easter eggs, but he went from having 5,000 people on his launch list to 100,000 people within a 24-hour window, right? And so that doesn't validate that you're going to be able to make money, but it certainly validates that there's demand out there, right? And that's going to get the attention of investors and publicity, and so it basically snowballed, right? But these are all ways that, and even if you look at the Dropbox development, I think he had promised that in 6 months they were going to release the feature. And it ended up being 18 months later when Dropbox was finally released to the public, right? And so would you want to spend 18 months developing something only to find out that nobody wanted it, right? And so what helps me is thinking of thinking experiments sort of like in two contexts. One is we have these predictive experiments, right? And really their purpose is to de-risk something that is going to be a big investment for us, right? When we haven't gotten evidence. And as much as possible, we're putting customers sometimes in a hypothetical situation. Like if I talk to 10 people here and I offer them, I'm going to do a workshop. Would you guys want to hypothetically sign up for this? And if you are, give me a $20 deposit, right? Or give me a $200 deposit, right? We try to put sometimes people in hypothetical situations, but the main idea here is that we're using proxies, we're using other elements for the actual product when you don't have code, when you don't have something to show someone necessarily that is live and functioning, as a way to iteratively figure out if we should do that next thing. And then when we look at throughput experiments, these really just map out to the factory, to the system itself. What we're focused on there is we're focused on either bringing in new people to the top, to the very beginning of the funnel, right? So we can produce more, or we're focused on converting more people so we can produce more at the end of it, or we're trying to shorten that time frame. We're actually trying to get people to pay us faster because that's another element of just having a good cash flow is the sooner that people pay you, the sooner you have that money. And the thing is, the throughput experiments, really what those are about having good metrics. Those are about actually being able to just see if you're making progress. And for the most part, I think in a lot of times they're honest, right? Where it gets really challenging is in the predictive experiments, because this is when entrepreneurs need to get creative, right? This is where we have to think outside of the box, and where we really try to find other ways to gather evidence when sometimes maybe we don't have a very simple way to do it. And another thing that is maybe a distinction between them is that these are riddled with bias, right? If I'm talking to 20 people, I probably selected those 20 people, right? And if I'm only talking to 20 people, well, there's no statistical significance to that, right? Whereas when you're doing throughput experiments, you have a baseline, right? You have a very clear yes or no answer. And so, so when we're doing, but even with that, right? Even saying with the bias, just keep in context that the predictive experiment is not supposed to be that end all. You don't run just one predictive experiment. A lot of times it's an iteration, right? It's a series of experiments that go out and really start giving you that evidence. And so here I wanted to go back to this big feature that we talked about. And so I wanted to share just some simple ideas of how we could test this out, right?
Just real quick before you get it strikes me, in science, even if we are running an experiment, you're right that we would probably want to have some evidence that for kind of the assumption or the hypothesis behind what our predictions are going to be. In science, though, we would normally want to conduct some sort of observations in order to come to those assumptions and hypotheses that inform predictions. And so I think part of this presentation was focusing on experiments, so maybe that's the reason you didn't mention it, but just doing some observational studies of users or some interviews might yield some of these hypotheses that would help you determine which.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I thought about that also in the presentation because maybe just to touch on that a little bit more. I wouldn't treat observation actually as an experiment, right? Because really the purpose of the observation is to gain insights or to start getting those hypotheses. And so if we're looking at predictive experiments, the thing that I would recommend is that there's still a measurement, right? Even if it's verbal, even if it's how many click a button, even if it's a fake button, we're trying to make that commitment, or we're trying to make that data a little bit stronger. Because I'll share this in an example that I did but I have very strong opinions as far as what I should do. I get to talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. I build products, but through trial and error and through many experiments that proved me wrong, observation isn't enough, right? So we want to have strong opinions that we hold weekly and that we're okay with going out and really trying to get evidence for. So that would be the thing is, even in these, I would say that you're still trying to have some measurement, right? You're still trying to get some commitment, but that observation is the foundation of what really, of really where you begin to see what to go out and to run.
Something I've seen here too, and this is a great place to use crowdfunding. A lot of people think crowdfunding, well, the only goal is to raise money. It's also a great experiment. Whether you get the money or not, you learn something.
Yeah.
Because they have to actually pay money to be considered to be part of crowdfunding.
Yep.
And I've had some clients of mine, that's how they do a lot of their experiments that cost money, is they'll do a crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, yeah, and we talked about this earlier, but I think Kickstarter and crowdfunding is probably one of the best things. Like if you are trying to start off a product, it's one of the best tests that you can do because you're de-risking it, right? You're only really saying that I'm going to invest in doing this if I get X amount of money. So I need $50,000, and if I can raise that, I'm going to place that first order, or we're going to build out the app. So there, that's, you're really de-risking your product as far as like a cost to yourself. The second element to it, which is great, is it's a really good channel test, right? Just because you put it up there doesn't mean that people are going to fund you, right? If you have a Twitter base of 100 people, or if you don't have, any emails, how are you going to drive traffic to that? That's one of the fundamental risks for every single business is, regardless of if you're a consultant, if you have a taco stand, if you have a product, how you actually drive people to your product is something that every single entrepreneur has to overcome. And so that's why I think Kickstarter is one of those perfect ways really to go out and test your product. Yeah.
But wouldn't you say that before you would put anything on Kickstarter? Because I've seen
Yes.
I've seen products, so you have to have that background proof that there's something there already before you get there. Because a lot of times they show what the whole background is to get you excited.
Yeah.
So there would still need to be those initial experiments before you went ahead.
Yeah, 100%. And I would even probably then say that Kickstarter is more of a throughput style experiment. You're really trying to, at the end of the day, you're trying to produce enough potentially paying customers. And so you would do lots of things. You could do prominent reviews, you might do a local campaign, but you would probably want to run multiple experiments before really putting out your one big push on that.
There's a lot of crowdfunding platforms though, that Kickstarter and others, they expect you to have a product that's already ready to be delivered.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crowdfunding platforms out there that are cheap. It's a good way to prove an idea. That, the basic question is, will somebody actually pay for it?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Yeah, and the one challenge or the one sort of like shortcoming that comes with these systems is that people start to game this, right? Like there are psychological tactics that if I were to do a Kickstarter campaign, I would have 40% of the money that I needed already committed from my friends, right? Because they have shown studies that, and Seth Godin talks about this, people don't want to commit to a project that's not going to be successful, right? And so I think it's something that like 70 or 80% of Kickstarter products or projects that get above that 40-50% threshold go on to be successful, right? And the other people who are below that, it's like a 5% success rate, right? So there are ways that you can game this, and this again goes with like doing due diligence and really understanding sort of what your experiment is going to be. Okay, so now let's jump into some case studies. And so this is going to be with Lean Stack. These are more or less the numbers that we have, and I want to show you guys an idea that we had, and this is something that we started testing in December. So it's hot out of the experiment oven. So we had an idea that we wanted to create a feature which is going to be a visual way to sort of go out and experiment and to model pricing for different products. This wasn't the only feature. This was a big feature, and for us, we're a smaller team, so 100 to 120 hours is something that's probably going to be about a month for us. And as I said earlier, I have a very strong understanding of what the problems are. We run workshops. I do weekly office hours with entrepreneurs, and I talk to people on a weekly basis. But in this specific context, I had zero evidence that this feature actually is going to deliver value, right? If you were to ask me, how do I know this is a good idea? Like, what evidence would I tell you? I would tell you I don't, right? I've seen people struggle with this. I know that we are trying to get people to upgrade more. We have other features that are great, but people aren't getting to them, right? And I think this feature can be a bridge between the canvas to the experiments. And so rather than going out and building this blindly, what we did is we decided to do a Google Docs version of it. And this was really to test, well, are people getting the value? And this is something that rather than taking like a month to build, this is something that I did in a day, right? I was able to build it out in 2 hours, and then I was able to start testing it with real people who had signed up for our product within that same week. And so I started off by making a spreadsheet, right? And this gave me a lot of constraints. I wanted this to be a visual tool, but what you guys can see from here is that this doesn't really look visually appealing, right? Not that there aren't like the fancy charts and the sliders and the things that I'm imagining in my mind, but the core value, what we're really giving people is a simpler way to go figure out pricing and to see how that impacts the rest of their business. And so to actually find the people to talk to, what I did is I set up an enticing lifecycle email. And I want to read it out because there are also some tactics that I use that I think you guys, if you start writing emails, should all incorporate or give a shot at least. So Emiliano here, one of the founders of Lean Stack. Are you up for giving some feedback and testing some new unreleased features? The new stuff helps you figure out pricing across multiple revenue streams and visualize a conversion funnel to hit your revenue goal. Fun stuff for an entrepreneur to play with. You'd be helping us decide if the new stuff is worth building out into the tool or should be killed, all in a quick 15-minute Skype chat. We can also go through your product and talk about any questions with the tool/lean methodology. Anything is fair game. So just reply to this email with some times that work for you in the next week with your time zone, right? Travis does a lot of interviews like this. And so one of the things I did here is I made it super easy for them. I have a Google Calendar. I have like a more automated way for people to schedule with me. But here, I wanted to make it as painless, as frictionless, right? It's literally, you reply to this email, right? The other important thing that I did here is that I gave them a carrot, right? This isn't about give up 15 minutes of your time to help my business be more successful. This was me also offering 15 minutes to talk about their product, any challenges that they have. And then the other thing is also, I made it sound like it was a fun feature, right? It wasn't like, hey, I want you to come in and put some numbers into a Google Docs spreadsheet. We're going to model something. We're going to look at revenue, right? These are things that I know entrepreneurs love to play with. You give them something that's going to tell them they have to make $400, and then they want to see what happens when it goes to 500, right? So really, yeah, those, and I share these lessons because I've written a lot of emails, and I will say with this one even also, this doesn't get 100% response rate, right? I was sending this out 2 weeks before Christmas, which is a horrible time to try to get people to do things. But even from that, I was able to get people to jump on a call with me, right? And I don't have a screenshot of this, so I made a funny face and took a picture of myself. But what I did is, in lieu of talking to people face to face, I did a Google Hangout, and I created this Google Doc, and I would just put them in front of it. We would go through the canvas first. I would get some background information on them, but then I would watch them fill this out. Like I would literally say, okay, start there, and then that's it. And so as I walked people through it, I learned a lot. It went beyond just even like the value itself. But for all of you guys there, if you don't have an audience here in Austin, if you can get to people, I have successfully used Google Hangouts, Skype, telephone calls. Like any of those options are much better than not talking to any single people. And then at the end of this, the obvious question you ask would be like, hey, was this valuable, right? And I did ask that question, but one of the things that I also try to do is I'm trying to see like, this is a value feature, right? So I'm trying to ask in more than one way, really what connected for people, right? Like what were the things about it that proved to be successful? And so that's like a great one was like, what surprised you, right? And from there, I got to learn a lot. And at the end of it, the lesson that I learned was that, yes, every single person said this was a valuable feature. And so with that, that's not worth much. It's a good reaction that people say yes to it, but I can tell you from other interviews that I've done, people will lie to you out of kindness, right? You are, yeah, I see some people shaking their head. You are an entrepreneur. You are presenting your baby to them, and they don't want to be like, your baby's ugly, right? It's got this divot on its head. The skull hasn't like completely formed out, and so people will be like, yeah, that's a good feature, right? And so through the observation part of it, I could definitely begin to see what was valuable, but really where I got good feedback was people asking me on their own, how can I get a copy of this, right? This was a Google Doc. And people wanted to download it. People wanted to actually share it to their friends. Someone emailed me a few days later, and they asked for my permission to go ahead and email this to someone else, right? And so those are good intent. Those are good signals of customer pull, right? Of someone actually telling me that they want this. And then the other thing, I touched upon this a little bit, okay. Yeah, this was the first pass, right? Maybe this wasn't as obvious, but this is how I first started off doing the spreadsheet. And then it ended up looking like this, right? Where you see I refined it. And this came through actually working with real customers in their real data sets, right? I think one thing in like, if I ever do graph mockups, those numbers are always like trending up. But in the real world, numbers don't look like that all the time. And so one of the things that is great about doing observation or doing usability is that you start getting a larger sample size. And you get away from the persona, the hypothetical person, and you get real data to work with, right? And that a lot of times presents new challenges. And so that was the end of that experiment. We are now at the phase of building it out. Probably tomorrow, start working on some HTML and some code. But that was a way that, we took that risky feature, and we tried running a predictive experiment, right? And again, this isn't perfect. I talked to 15 people, but it was a way for us really to go out and make sure that to get a better understanding of it, right? Any questions on it? Yeah.
What was your success criteria for it?
Yeah, that's a good question. In all honesty, we didn't have, I didn't say like, I had to get 6 out of the 10 people to say yes to it. I think for me, it was that a big part of what like the tool is good for is seeing your idea in a different way, right? And through the observational thing, I literally had people who thought that they were going to be able to build a $4 a month product, and through modeling this, that there was no way that was feasible, right? And so for here, there was no definitive metric where I said they did this action. In other tests, we could have tried doing something like that, but it was through the reaction that I got in how people learned from the tool.
So why are you looking for that?
I'm sorry?
Why are you going to build it? What made you say this is, why not just keep it in the spreadsheet?
Well, so that's a good question. So the thing here is we have an existing app, right? And so this is a tool that we feel like this is part of a process of going from one feature of the tool to another. And so I have done observations. I have done interviews with people and trying to figure out why are you getting stuck here. And so this is what we feel. This is a feature that we need to build into the tool to help sequence people within the tool, right? Not outside of it, going forward. So, and those are good questions, right? Like I don't have any problem saying that I'm telling you guys to go and try to do this as much of a commitment level, and
Well, would like a follow-up A/B test be like, look at the tool, including this new feature, look at it without, see if it moves the needle, right?
yeah, exactly. So maybe I'll talk about what we are going to do. So this 80 to 100 hour build is now what it's going to take. I think we'll probably spend about 20 or 30 hours. I spent a day doing a wireframe, and now what I'm doing is we're going to split test. We're going to roll out the feature to a partial group of users, and we're going to measure actually if it does make an impact. We're not going to blindly put the tool out. So there is some more rigorous testing that's going to happen with it. And so that would be closer to what you're talking about, right? Where we are actually trying to then put it into the wild and see. And what I learned also from doing some of the observation is that not all of the features that I expected actually had to be built, right? We can do with something that is a little bit smaller and will be easier to put out. Okay, so now let's look at another fun one. So we have a different product, which is User Cycle. And this is an analytics tool, and it also does lifecycle emails, and it does split testing, right? And really, it's a tool for helping SaaS products engineer growth. And the thing with this tool is that it's a very powerful tool, but it's good for a very small audience, right? This is not a tool where that if you're an early stage entrepreneur, you should be using it. If you have an e-commerce site, you should be using it. And so I'm going to sort of pick this one up in midstream. So I was targeting doing awareness, and we had an existing site. It was very problem oriented, and I basically spent a few days pushing out a new variant, right? And I actually interviewed some of the people here in this room. I showed them the old page. I showed some people the new pages, and I was trying to get a sense of what worked, what didn't work, right? And that influenced me when I made this new page. And so we were trying to get to about a 15% conversion rate. And when I pushed out this new page, it didn't work, or it didn't get to that level, right? It only got us a 1% increase. And so again, so what I did is, I did a very similar thing. I started cold emailing people who were ideal targets, right? People who I would see that are SaaS businesses, have about the level of sign-up that I want, and are technical co-founders, right? Because again, this was an analytics tool. There was a lot of integration that needs to happen at the beginning of it, which makes it difficult for a lot of other startups, right? And so I did a similar thing here, right? I personalized the beginning of them. I told them 10 minutes, this is going to be something quick. And then I also offered to share feedback with this. And so in testing this new landing page, right, because I still didn't understand why this landing page wasn't working. This was strictly observational at this point. We heard from people that, User Cycle looks very promising. There are a lot of good feature sets there, but for that price, and User Cycle started off at $200 a month, right? Because again, we're not targeting early stage entrepreneurs. It would need to do X feature and then Y feature. And so scoping that out, we're looking at something that would be anywhere from about 60 to 80 hours for that basic functionality being requested. But the challenge here was that, we weren't trying to drive retention. We weren't trying to put out features to help people stay engaged with the tool. I was specifically trying to get more people to convert into the funnel. And so what this gave me, it gave me actually an opportunity to, rather than build out that feature set, was to mock it up, right? And to put that mock-up on our landing pages and see, well, if that's the issue that people are saying, if people are saying, I'm not signing up for that tool because you don't have that feature set, well, let's test that out, right? Let's actually put a screenshot of how that feature set is going to work. And so that's what we did here. I pushed that out. This was something that I was able to do in a day, set up an experiment. And at the end of the day, it didn't increase the conversion rate significantly, right? And so this was a really good way that using a predictive style experiment, right, which using a different proxy, not building out that full feature, but giving the appearance of having the feature, I was able to save, I was able to basically more efficiently find out that wasn't the root cause of what was going on with our experiment. And then that freed up my time to get to the new experiment, right?
What do you do when the user that signed up and installed that feature discovers that it doesn't have the feature's not there? Do you have an apology page to explain?
That is a fantastic question. And so, where we say the scope of that is 60 to 80 hours, we knew that we could build that functionality out within that time. And for most people, because it was really around revenue, those numbers don't come in the first few weeks. What you're looking at are the shorter events. You're looking at sign-up rates, you're looking at activation. And so we had a buffer within the tool where someone who had just signed up for it was not going to be focused on looking at revenue. They were really going to be focused on still integrating and looking at shorter things, right? So in this thing, we never deliver something, we never promise something that we can't go out and deliver, right? And at a worst case scenario, if this had caused a lot of people to sign up, we could have hired an extra developer, right? If we saw that this was really that missing piece and now people were signing up like gangbusters for it, then we know other developers we could have hired, we could have scaled up quickly if needed.
What did you do with the 1 or 2 people that signed up that expected that feature?
No one expected that feature. Like at the end of the day,
what would you do if, in order to build out the feature, you needed, say, 50 people to sign up in that time group, and you had 2? What would you do with those 2 people?
In this case, it's a feature that we had been thinking about. We probably would have built it out, right? If it really, the lifetime value of our customers would warrant that. It would take a little bit longer, but at the end of the day, it didn't make a difference. Like people didn't sign up for that specific feature. The other stuff that was in there is what those people were signing up for. But we would build it out at the end of the day. I will say you can't promise something to someone and then be like, hey, oops, guess what? You just did all this integration work, you gave me some money, but that thing I said I'm not going to give it to you, right? We would build it out.
You're saying during that period nobody signed up?
No, what I'm saying is people did sign up, but no one asked about that feature. No one literally said, hey, I saw this feature on the landing page, and where is it? Because I said there was a lot of functionality to this tool, and that is also one of the things that has been challenging for us, is that we have people signing up for the tool for different reasons, right? Some people really care about the lifecycle emails and don't care at all about the metrics, right? And other people, they don't do emails, right? They have different systems for that, and they want some of the metrics that we do. So, but yeah, no one asked about it. We never got put in that position. Yeah.
I was just thinking about it, that it happens all the time, like you were pointing to, I just added this feature.
Yeah.
Then we buy it. It's something that happens in all companies, big and small.
Yeah.
Salesperson comes and says, develop team, just need to develop this one feature. I'll make X, Y, sale, and everything will be good. It very infrequently works out that way, and it's nice to not have to make that huge investment in development. Run a small experiment to test them.
Yeah, exactly. And I even think for me, a lot of times, like, I always joke that feels like I'm 2 months away from that curve, right? It always feels like it's within a short horizon. We're just 2 months away of finishing this feature or getting this one thing right, and then it's going to start working, right? So to sort of, yeah.
So you said because you kind of bailed out that feature via your landing page, and then you could move on to the next iteration of experiments. Was the next experiment, did that also come out of the interviews? So did you kind of like have this prioritized list of, based on the interviews, these are the different experiments we think would actually be legal?
Yeah, and so to share what we did, because acquisition was our big option, we put a lower pricing point, right? We have a large audience with a lot of people who are starting off because of Ash's book. And so one of the hypotheses that we had is that, if we could do a tiered plan, so let's say we could start off at 29 and it increments a little bit softer, people would start to sign up for the tool. So we did that. We actually removed, and that was something like in the back of our mind, right? We didn't want to go to that price point per se initially, because we felt like we were giving up revenue, and we at the time also were doing a lot of concierge service, right? We would offer one-to-one chats with people, looking at their metrics and doing that stuff, and that stuff doesn't scale as easily. And so we were very reluctant. But at the end of the day, we had a target of of where we wanted to get acquisition, that conversion point to. And so we tested it. We implemented this new pricing plan, and we split it. And then from there, we saw that it wasn't pricing, right? We did get some more people signing up, but not at the rate that we actually needed to keep the company to the growth that we wanted.
And so how did you decide to prioritize the first test over the pricing test?
Well, that came through the observations that I did, through emailing people and talking to them. And similarly, it was like, when I was doing those things, I would ask those people to be like, what is that one thing that you could get right now that would really have an impact on the business, right? I was really trying to see what was that feature set that was missing, that was very valuable. So that's how that came. It really came through those direct interviews that I did through the cold emailing. Because those people, again, those were our ideal customers. Those were people that I felt that if they signed up for User Cycle, they would have been happy. Right. And so just to sort of wrap up, I know it's 8:15 now, so if anyone needs to take off. I like this quote from, I butchered his name earlier, from Drew Houston, from the founder of Dropbox. Not launching is painful. And I can say from my personal experience that, designing a landing page and having it perform worse than what's existing is not something that you feel like emotionally happy about. But spending 6 months building something that nobody wants is the worst thing possible, right? You feel literally like that you learned a very valuable lesson for an extremely high cost. And so I hope, through what I've shared tonight that, that you guys have seen really more of what your job is to create those happy customers, right? To have it as sort of this manufacturing system. And then that even when you don't have code, even when you don't have that product, right? When you're facing those risky scenarios, there are ways that you can go out, and there are other experiments that we can do to learn faster and, to not really have such a big risk there waiting for us. So with that is the end of the presentation.